Hey, this is Isar with UX in Motion, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to turn an avatar into a header in After Effects. Okay, so what's this all about? Well, sometimes you need to work on this animation where you have an avatar, you need to turn it into a header. It's a little trickier than it looks. I actually spent a fair amount of time doing all kinds of versioning. I wasn't happy with any of the versions. Right now, this is the best version I've come up with. So let's check this out and let's build it out. So here's what we have right here in After Effects. And I'll just slow this down. I'll tell you what's going on, and then we're going to build it together. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and click that download link in the text description and download the assets. It looks like this. You'll get a folder on your computer here. And I've got the assets. I've got the After Effects project file, the design assets. Just giving that all to you, and we can do it together. We can work on the project together. It'll be freaking awesome. Okay, so here's what we have here, and I'll just break it down real quick. So what we have is we have this main image here, and we're going to be using a mask and just kind of playing with the values here so that the timing really works and feels good. The title here, Santa Cruz, isn't going to move a lot. Your design may move more, like in your project. In this design, it's not really moving a lot. It's just moving a tiny bit. You can't even really hardly notice it. This line here, just a little detail highlight is going to come out. We're going to use a scale property. And then text here is just going to fade out. We're just going to try and get it as clean and tight as possible. With these UX projects, we don't want to be throwing a lot of weird motion around when we don't have to. We want to keep it really tight, really crisp, really clean. And then we're just going to have a little white solid on the background, just kind of fade it out. I'm not a huge fan of fades in UX projects, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And I think you know what I'm talking about. All right, let's do this beast. So you can do a file import. You can just go into File, Import. You can just hit Command-I. That's what I like to do. And we're going to find that file. So look for that After Effects, how to turn an avatar into a header in After Effects Illustrator file. Going to want to make sure it's composition, retain layer size, or you're going to be in a world of hurt and you're going to resent me probably. Double click your composition and let's get in this game. Okay, so a couple little kind of tricky logistical finessing things. We're going to start building this image with the circle and the avatar, and we're going to hit that hard first. So I'm just going to turn off a whole bunch of other stuff. We've got this reference layer here. That we can see, we can kind of base this around. Sometimes you're designing things and then you have to rebuild the design in After Effects. So this is kind of one of those times where you just got to knuckle down and do it. So we're going to take this header photo here, and I'm going to start off by just dropping the opacity down so we can actually look at this reference background layer here. And I'm just going to use, so I did bring in this mask solid here. Let's look at our file in Illustrator real quick. I forgot to do that. If you prep your file right, you'll save a lot of time. So what we have here, I'll just turn off everything. We have this background layer. No motion is going to be happening. Cool. We'll just flatten it all. We've got this reference layer here. We've got the copy just in this paragraph. We've got a little line going on. We've got a title. And we've got this header photo. It's kind of the main hero thing we're going to be working on. And this little mask shape here. So essentially what we're going to start off doing, I may not even be working with the mask shape. Sometimes it's good to just bring it in, have more assets to work with. Because we're actually going to be working with a mask this time, not a track matte, an actual mask on the layer, it'll give us some options that a track matte doesn't have, and I'll show you how to do that. So first things first is we're just going to draw the mask. So on your layer, make sure your layer is selected. You can go, it's like layer new mask, something, I don't know, add mask, new mask. I just know the keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-N, new mask. Makes a lame mask by default, just this rectangle here, and if you twirl down your triangle, you get this masks tab, which you may or may not be happy with. We're just gonna just redraw something on top of this. So I'm trying to just hit this area here where this circle is. So I'm just gonna click and drag and hold down the Shift key here. And it's going to draw like a new mask, and we'll work with that in a second. But what I'm going to want to do first is just delete this old mask. So the reason we're doing it like this is because when you make a mask, it doesn't make like a new blank mask. It just puts something in there. So we don't want the thing that's in there, but we're going to draw, like using this, we're going to draw another layer, which will come in as a mask because we've already started a mask and because this layer is selected. So now this masks tab here, I'm just going to click this and delete mask 1. So now we have this mask here. A couple weird things about masks too, like edit the mask, you can double click it, and occasionally what will happen is you'll double click it and you'll click the footage, the actual layer, and you'll end up in this window and you'll be like, dude, Isar, what do I do? This is just the footage view. It happens all the time. It's super annoying. You can just click back. It just made a new tab up here. You can just click back, but then you'll have to go back and hit the mask thing and reselect that, and just try and make sure you double click that line right there. That can be very helpful. If you want a great pro tip, if you go into your preferences, I wasn't going to expect to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, path, point, and handle size. Here you go, right here. It's set to 5. You can just increase that number to 15, and all of a sudden you'll get these monster handles here. So notice how these things got a lot bigger. That's because we went to After Effects Preferences, and I cranked it up to 15. We may want to drop it down to 10, and these get smaller, but it gives you a little bit more to grab onto, which is great. So now that we have these handles here, we're just going to line it up. And it looks pretty good, like I drew it okay. So, but if it wasn't, we'd see this, and I'm just gonna line this up and position, and basically all we're looking to do is just get it the right size and position over our reference layer. So that's okay. I'm gonna hit enter, return to just kind of complete that. So now we have a cool mask. How about that? So one of the things, so we did it kind of wrong here and we did it backwards. So I'm gonna show you how to fix that, which is always great. So with the mask here, you can actually just set it to none if you don't want it to reveal anything. The first thing we should have done is just shrunk down the layer, scaled and positioned it the right way. So sometimes when you're working in After Effects, you want to do something, but then it ends up putting you down a path that isn't like the best. So I'm going to show you how to basically fix that. So the first thing we could do is we could just undo and delete the mask and then reapply it. That might be the fastest thing. So I'm just going to take this mask and I'm going to hit Command X. I'm just going to remove it. And I'm going to take this header photo and I'm going to hit first, we're going to kind of build the animation. And by that, I mean, we're just going to capture these keyframes right here where it's at, the position and scale. So I'm going to hit Option S, Option P. Bear with me, this will make a lot more sense in a minute. I know I probably lost you with this. So, okay, so we want to keep this position right here. And don't worry about the opacity right now. We're just using that as a reference. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this, and you can see that just by doing this and holding on Shift key, it's actually just scaling these values here. And then I can click and drag it so that it's basically where we want it to be over here. And I'm just going to do this a little bit more. And you can see it's kind of an annoying thing about like Illustrator sometimes is get this white bounding box. Disregard that. We're just trying to get this lined up to cover this down here. So I'm going to make it a little bigger. We're going to get it. It's okay if it's not perfect. We're not going for perfection here with these edges. We're kind of going for the concept. Okay, so now I have these keyframes and these keyframes. I've kind of captured these here. We're going to use that in the animation, but actually we just wanted to build and capture these keyframes as like data on the timeline. So now I'm going to hit Command V and I'm going to paste in this mask. The weird thing about masks is it factors in the scale property, so it shrunk it down. So now we're going to make it bigger because we want it to start off in the right place. And I'm going to zoom in here and just, combination of the keyboard and just kind of nudging. We're just kind of nudging things around a little bit and get it maybe a little bit bigger here. Okay, call that great. So now we have our mask in here. Now I'm going to just put the opacity back to 100. So I'm going to hit Command Shift O, sorry, not 0. Then I'm going to hit 100, set that back to 100, and I'm going to set that mask back to add because I want to just add in what's inside it. You can have it be subtract. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. That looks really cool actually, but that's only because that reference is on. Now it looks like that, which is not as cool. So we're going to make it go back to add. We're going to use that. Okay, so now I can hit Option M, and I've got that mask keyframe, all that data captured in one keyframe. And if I hit K and I hit M again, Option M again, I've got all this nice mask keyframes that we can start to work with this. So I'm going to hit Command A and hit U on the keyboard, and then U again, just to view the keyframes that we're working with. It's just a little thing that I do sometimes to clean up this timeline so it's not tons of layers. You can hit all, Command A to select all, hit U, it'll close it down, and then hit U again, it'll open it all up. You'll be stoked. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Now, what we can do is we can start to play with this mask property. So I'm just going to have it transform and grow out. So the way masks work is you only have the mask path keyframe. That's pretty much it. You don't have like scale, position, rotation, and all that stuff. You get that with track mats. So with this, so to get these handles here, just double click on it, and then you can hit Command Option, Command Shift, and start dragging out, and it'll drag it out from the center. Basically what we're going for is we're just trying to just clear this edge here so we're nice and square. You can see that this is going to do something like this, and we're going to finesse it. So if I was to play this back right now, you'd be extremely underwhelmed and probably regretting that you were watching this tutorial. Don't worry, we'll make it cool in a second. Let's start to actually build some integrity with the timeline here. So I'm going to start at frame 34. I'm going to click and drag this over here. I'm going to double check that I'm working at 60 frames a second. So hit Command K, check that out. We're awesome there. If you're not, make it 60. And then I'm just going to make this like 34 frames long. So I'm just moving the playback head using my keyboard. So I'm hitting Command Shift right arrow to jump 10 frames. And then I'm hitting plus and minus on the keyboard to zoom in and out of the timeline, and click and drag, holding down the space bar to do this. Also, Shift question mark will make your project go full screen, which is, or they'll scale it to where you want it. That's going to feel better, and I'm going to hit N here to close the work area on the timeline. So let's talk about easing. After Effects easing sucks. I use the Flow plugin, which is great. I don't get paid any money from them, but it's right here, and basically one click and you're like adding developer-friendly velocity curves to your projects, which is freaking great. So I'm going to add the cubic out, and I'm going to hit apply. And again, this is a transition. We're not designing an interaction. We're designing an actual transition. So you want to start fast. You want no easing on the front. You want very like hard, and then it slows down. That's what we're going for. So I'm going to take this here, just play it back. That's starting to feel not too shabby. And you can see if we slow it down, we have this going on. Now, if I wanted to, like, if I'm not pleased with these edges here, one of the things I can do is I can start to slide these guys in here. And what this will do is it'll make it feel a little bit more like the edges aren't being cropped, basically, is what we're going for with this. And I find that when I reposition stuff, and I tend to have to like reapply the curve here, and it's always a weird thing, but just something to be aware of, that you may find yourself that if the timing gets broken, even though the keyframes are lined up, just reapply that curve if you're using Flow. Okay, so I think that's not too shabby. We'll just back off a hair. There, it feels a little tight, but still pretty cool. Okay. Now let's work on something else in the stack here. So we've got this. Well, let's work on Santa Cruz. So Santa Cruz is actually not going to do much in this design. Unfortunately, I know it's a bummer for everybody, but we'll just set some position keyframe properties anyway. And I want to make sure that I'm respecting the entire duration here. So Command or Option P, drop some position properties. And we have that now. We can slide it around a little bit if we need to. Let's attack that line. Got this line here. I'm going to hit J on the keyboard, which jumps me to the previous keyframe. K takes me to the next keyframe. This is how you get fast in After Effects and turn into a wild animal like me, because you know all these keyboard shortcuts, all about becoming a wild animal in After Effects. So now, to do this simple trick with just a line, you can get all crazy with doing it perfect, and if it was a fatter line, you might want to actually animate the path. Because it's subtle, you can kind of get away with this hack. It's a little hacky, but I think it's okay for us for today. Option S, we're going to scale it, and then hit K and drop in that scale property over here so we have that captured at 100%. I'm going to unlink this. So now we can just scale one property at a time. I'm going to go back here, and I'm just going to drop this number down to 0. I'm going to drop this number down to 0. And what it'll do is it'll just scale it out. See that? Boom. We got a little scale. Just boom. Very simple, clean, easy way to do that. Okay, let's check out our copy here. And you can see we have an issue with this overlay, which we're not happy with, but maybe we'll get happier in a bit. I think I'm going to want to fade this on and just add a little bit of motion here. Now, this is a tricky design challenge. You don't want to add a ton of motion with the text. it starts to call unwarranted attention to itself, but we have to get it on there and we can't just cut and have it pop. So my solution for today is, and again, I recommend you do a lot of versioning, a lot of testing to get it right. This is a tricky thing right here. I actually spent a fair amount of time trying to not look horrible. So we're going to drop some position keyframes and some opacity keyframes. So I'm just hitting J and K, jumping around, and adding opacity and position keyframes. So let's just have it come up a little bit. So I'm just using the keyboard, shift up and down arrow, jumps at 10. So we're just going to have it come up, and then Command Shift O, hit 0, hit return, that drops it to 0. I like to work from the keyboard. I have an After Effects tutorial on keyboard shortcuts. You can go watch that if you don't believe me. It's cool stuff. Okay, and again, we haven't eased these yet. We're just blocking the motion out. Now, look at this. We have this layering issue. I'm going to throw on a white solid. I could have designed that in Illustrator, but I didn't, so I'm just going to show you how to do that real quick. Sometimes this is how you roll. Command Y will make you a new solid. Yours is probably going to default to some lovely Adobe crappy color like red. You can just click that color swatch, make it white, hit return. Make sure it's comp size, should be 1080 by 1920. Hit yeah. And we're going to call that, like white BG. We're just going to move that below copy. So to rename it, I hit enter on the keyboard. And to move it down, you can just click and drag. Or if you want to be cool like me, you can hit Command left bracket. And that's sweet. Now I'm going to show you something fancy. So if you hit T, you bring up the opacity thing. After Effects has finally, thank you engineers, have introduced an extremely valuable, extremely cool feature for UI prototyping. Of course, it's for anybody, but it's really helpful for us because we got to build fast and lean means fewer keyframes. And if you can't write code like me, then you're just kind of doing as best you can. But now with this selective parenting tool, I can click the opacity, and you'll see on this parent column here, make sure you see that. If you don't, well, you see it in either column, so it's there anyway. If you don't see it, then you don't see it. But you can take this opacity column here and see this pick whip. There's the general parenting one, but now there's a property specific one. I can click that and drag it to the opacity here. It automatically just writes a little piece of code here. So these values are now red, and it writes some crazy thing like this, which is sweet. But now I don't need keyframes to fade this white background. This white background is totally synced using these keyframes here. So that's freaking awesome. So now I'm just going to slap this easing on everything and play it out. So I'm going to select all my keyframes one more time, hit apply, and let's just hit play here. And that looks downright terrible. So it looks like somehow it didn't grab these. Hit apply. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. Okay. That's looking fresh. Now, I think as a last thing, let's just add a finger tap here. I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm feeling inspired. So I've included this in your download folder, so you can just grab it from there. I'm going to hit Command I. It is actually its own After Effects project file. Bet you didn't know that. You could import After Effects project files into other ones. If you knew that, you're awesome. It comes in as just a folder with a comp. You can double click that. I'm just going to copy this shape. So I'm going to hit copy, and then I'm just going to delete this to just clean everything up. You don't have to do that, but I like to do that. So now I'm going to move my playback head back here. I'm going to hit paste, Command V and U to see what's going on here. Now we have two problems, and we're going to fix both those problems for you right now, my friend. One problem is it's too small. The other problem is it's white on white, which is not visually awesome. So if I hit Command Shift H, you can't see it. If I hit Command Shift H again and I scoot it out from the keyboard, you can see that it's this little white shape here. So let's change that color. So with this selected, it's just a shape. So I can rename it. I can click that, hit return, call it tap. Now we're just going to go up to the fill here, make it a lovely shade of blue, something like that. And now we have a little bit more visibility, which is great. It's super small. Part of the problem is it's because we have a scale thing going on with it, I can't just scale it anyway. So I'll show you a quick hack that I do. Maybe you know something better, but I'll basically hit Command Option Shift Y and make a new null. A null is just a shape that's just has an anchor point that you can have some properties around. There's no pixels or anything there. So it's just a cool tool if you didn't know that. I'll show you how to use that now. So it just comes in, it's called null1, And the anchor point will be in the center of the canvas. I'm going to move it over to my tap here. We're just going to scale it up, but we can't use the scale property because it already has keyframes on it. What are you supposed to do? This is a way that works. I'm going to hit snapping, and if you hit Y on the keyboard, you get this anchor point tool up here. Then you can click and drag the anchor point of this layer just over on that tap, because as we scale it up, if we don't do that, if it's down here and I scale this up, watch what's going to happen. It's going to get pushed in some funky weird place, which is annoying. So before we parent this, hit Y on the keyboard, click and drag over here. If you don't see that anchor point, make sure your layer is selected. Okay, now I'm going to parent this tap layer. Just going to drag that parent over to the null layer. Now I'm going to hit S to view the null to the scale property. I'm just going to scale it up to where I want it to be, say there. And now I can just delete this, which is cool. And now it just scaled it up universally. It's kind of like a little magic trick. And we can just position it wherever we want. And now if this plays, if we just scrub it through here, we can see that it starts the animation. Now, as a last detail and courtesy to your viewers, let's do this. Let's kind of just slide all the keyframes over. So a fast way to do that is if you're in your timeline, if your playback head is hovering over your timeline, to be more specific, and you hit the tilde key to the left of the 1 on your keyboard, everything goes full screen. It's so awesome. Now, I'm just going to slide everything over just a little bit. I'm just going to click and drag these keyframes, and I'm going to click and drag this. And you can see that, this is approximately where things start. So I'll just kind of drop it in right around here and hit Command-Shift question mark, play it back, see what we got. And if I want to see it more full screen, I can hover and then hit the tilde key again, and we can see what's going on. You can see like it's almost a little too fast from the tap. Everything else is feeling okay. If I was polishing this and delivering this as a final thing, I might really tighten this up a little bit more. Feels maybe just a little slow to me, but it's built and now we can just tighten it. But this is good for now, I think. I'm just going to slide this finger tap over just a little bit over this way so we're not... So there's a hair, just a split, almost like a frame before the thing starts, or else it feels a little too chaotic. So that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed that. I had fun. A couple little tricky logistical things that made this one a little bit more challenging, but I think we pulled it off together. If you haven't already downloaded the source files, go ahead and do that. Enjoy yourself. Hit subscribe. I like creating these, and if you get value, then maybe you want these in your channel. And if you go over to my website, uxmotion.net, and download something, you'll be added to my list, and then you'll get these sent to you via email, which is awesome, unless it's not for you, and then you'll hit unsubscribe, and that'll be that. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.